MTR Corporation may have to tear up part of the platform slab at the Hong Kong Station extension for inspection. The US terminates a decades-old treaty with Iran after the International Court of Justice ordered Washington to lift sanctions against Iran. And 2 Catholic bishops from the Chinese mainland attend a major Vatican meeting for the first time after a landmark agreement.
Hello and a very good evening. The MTR Corporation may have to tear up part of a new platform at Hong Kong Station to check it has been built properly. This is because of ongoing concerns that safety standards may have been compromised while steel bars were installed. Caleb Long has more details.
Tear up part of a new platform at Hong Kong Station to confirm that the structure is safe. That's what the MTR Corporation may have to do amid construction scandals surrounding the station. There are fears that the steel bars used to build the platform were cut short to disguise that they weren't screwed in properly. The transport chief says ripping up the platform would only be carried out if necessary.
We are not ruling out the need to, open up the concrete slab, but whether or not we should do it depends on the outcome of MTR's investigation and their proposals to us.
Michael Tan, a lawmaker very familiar with the city's railways, says the government has accepted that part of the platform may need to be opened up under certain conditions.
The main structure of the platform will not be affected by this particular process of opening up the slab. And secondly, if it turned out to be a significant amount, what is the alternative solution other than demolishing the whole platform and starting over again?
Tian added that if 30 to 40% of the steel bars inspected were problematic, the whole platform may have to be rebuilt. This process may take 6 months to a year. Civil engineer Ngai Hock Yan has suggested using X-ray equipment to scan the station's concrete before tearing up part of the platform.
The penetration capacity is more effective, so probably you can identify the rebar location and the spacing for the top 2 or 3 layers of the rebars.
The scans could then be compared with the work plans to choose a location to tear up. The rail giant says it will listen to the advice of the government and experts and come up with an adequate proposal. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
The House Committee of the Legislative Council held a meeting today to discuss the government's performance in dealing with the aftermath of Super Typhoon Mangkhut. Lawmakers expressed their concerns over employees having to rush back to work right after the megastorm. Some of them called for legislation to provide better protection for workers. Christy Leung with the details.
Rushing back to work on the day after Super Typhoon Mangkhut hit the city. Even when public transport was far from being back in full service. Still, some got penalized for being late or being unable to report for work. The Hong Kong Federation of Trade Unions surveyed 690 workers from different trades, including the catering and aviation industries. 1/5 of them had their wages or bonuses cut for not being able to arrive at work. Nearly 90% of the respondents think the government should have announced an official day off for workers. Chief Executive Carrie Lam explained earlier that there is no legal basis for her to declare a day off for all employees, which prompted the Civic Party to table a private bill.
Give legal power to the Chief Executive to call a state of disaster. More importantly, in fact, the focus of this bill is we empower employees. They don't have to go to work if they see fit, and that prohibits employers from penalizing employees from doing so.
During a special meeting of the Legislative Council on the government's work in the wake of the Super Typhoon, a lawmaker representing the industrial sector agreed.
How much time should be given to employees to go back to work? Please indicate a reasonable period of time. I think in Hong Kong we can have a piece of legislation and we respect the rule of law. And then if somebody has exceeded the reasonable period of time needed to go back to work, there should be some penalties. Of course, we have to take care of the safety of individual employees. It is going to be a complicated matter, but it doesn't mean that we won't study the matter.
The Chief Secretary for Administration added the Security Bureau will look into the issue. Chris Dillon, TVB News.
US Vice President Mike Pence is accusing China of trying to undermine President Donald Trump and make aggressive moves against US military forces in the South China Sea. In a prepared speech that he will deliver at the Hudson Institute think tank in Washington later today, Pence will accuse Beijing of attempting to interfere in the upcoming US midterm elections. The US Vice President asserts that China wants a different American president in response to the Trump administration's protectionist trade tariffs on Chinese goods. Pence will also bring up an incident last week when a Chinese military vessel nearly collided with a US Navy ship in the waters around the disputed Nansha Islands in the South China Sea. The speech is likely to further inflame tensions between the world's two biggest economies, which are already at their worst in years.
Pope Francis opened a month-long gathering of the Catholic Church leadership by urging bishops to dream of a future free of the mistakes and sins of the past. This as 2 Chinese bishops attended the meeting for the first time since last month's landmark deal between Beijing and the Vatican. Jeff Tang reports.
It was business as usual at the Vatican as Pope Francis kicked off the month-long synod on young people, faith and vocational discernment. This year the Pontiff invited a pair of new participants to the advisory body. Today, for the first time, we also have with us 2 bishops from mainland China. We offer them our warm welcome. The attendance of Bishops Guo Jintai and Yang Xiaoting was the first tangible manifestation of the breakthrough deal reached between Beijing and the Vatican on September 22nd. Under the provisional agreement, the Pope will recognize 7 clergy initially ordained by Beijing without the Church's approval. It was an olive branch the Vatican couldn't refuse, as the deal finally gives it a say in the appointment of bishops in China. Critics have slammed the Holy See for selling out to the communist government. Hong Kong's Bishop Michael Yeung said yesterday the deal did nothing to soothe long-held church concerns over clerics in detention.
A provisional agreement could not solve all the problem, could not stop the suppression. The church still been tearing down, and the young folks under 18, they are not allowed to go to church.
This as China's approximately 12 million Catholics are split between an underground church swearing loyalty to the Vatican and the state-supervised Catholic Patriotic Association. The meeting of more than 300 church officials, outside experts and youth delegates takes place in the shadow of widespread sexual abuse of minors by priests in many countries. The Pontiff highlighted the importance of including the youth in the Catholic Church and urged those in attendance to reverse situations of uncertainty, exclusion and violence to which our young people are exposed. Meanwhile, a group of self-identified abuse survivors staged a sit-in protest near the Vatican to draw attention to their plight. A separate protest saw around 24 women asking for women's voting rights at the synod. They say while half of the world's faithful are female, they do not have the right to vote in the synod due to gender discrimination. Jeff Tang, TVB News.
The United States is maintaining its tough position on Iran, withdrawing from a diplomatic treaty and a convention amendment as it seeks to force Tehran to capitulate over its nuclear aspirations. The US is slowly turning up its pressure on Iran, and it doesn't care what the rest of the world thinks about that. In May, President Trump moved to restore tough US sanctions after withdrawing from Tehran's nuclear accord with world powers. Yesterday, the International Court of Justice ordered the US to lift its sanctions on Iran that affect imports of humanitarian goods and products and services linked to civil aviation safety. The Trump administration countered against that move by announcing it was terminating a decades-old treaty that Iran used as the basis for its case. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced that Washington would cancel a 1955 treaty establishing economic relations and consular rights between the two nations.
This is a decision, frankly, that is 39 years overdue. In July, Iran brought a meritless case in the International Court of Justice alleging violations of the Treaty of Amity. Iran seeks to challenge the United States' decision to cease participation in the Iran nuclear deal and to reimpose the sanctions that were lifted as a part of that deal.
In addition, President Trump's National Security Advisor John Bolton said America is pulling out of an amendment to the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations that Iran or others could use to sue the United States at the ICJ.
This really has less to do with Iran and the Palestinians than with the continued consistent policy of the United States to reject the jurisdiction of the International Court of Justice, which we think is politicized and ineffective.
Meanwhile, Iran's supreme leader says the Islamic Republic will slap the United States and overcome the new American sanctions targeting the nation. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei made the comments today in a speech in Tehran before thousands of members of a volunteer force under Iran's Revolutionary Guard.
A US Navy veteran was arrested in connection with suspicious envelopes addressed to President Donald Trump and two top military chiefs. 39-year-old William Clyde Allen III was taken into custody in the small Utah city of Logan. Police searched his home after two envelopes thought to contain the poison ricin actually contained castor seeds, the substance used to make ricin. Castor seeds can only cause injury if swallowed. Neither letter made it to the Pentagon. Meanwhile, the Secret Service isn't saying what was in the letter addressed to the president. That letter didn't reach the White House. Police say Allen has a prison record for attempted aggravated assault. Japan is bracing for another strong typhoon as Kongrai approaches the southern prefecture of Okinawa tonight. This will be the third storm to hit Japan in less than a month. Tokyo's meteorological agency says Typhoon Kongrai, packing winds of more than 140 kilometers per hour, is barreling north towards Okinawa. Officials have warned residents of Okinawa and neighboring Kagoshima Prefecture to stay alert for violent winds, high waves, mudslides and flooding in low-lying areas.
The wife of former Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak pleaded not guilty today to laundering illegal proceeds linked to the corruption scandal at the 1MDB State Investment Fund. Rosmah Mansour was charged with 12 counts of receiving proceeds from unlawful activities totaling nearly $1.7 million in her bank account between 2013 and 2017. Another 5 counts against her allege she failed to declare taxes on the money she received. Her husband, Najib, also appeared in court today for the management of his own trial over the 1MDB scandal. He's pleaded not guilty to multiple counts of money laundering, corruption, abuse of power and criminal breach of trust. He'll stand trial next year.
And still ahead tonight. Shops accused of conducting sight tests and selling contact lenses to customers in the absence of optometrists. A Consumer Council study finds the city's aging consumers vulnerable to unfair trade practices. And in Peru, a judge annuls former authoritarian president Alberto Fujimori's pardon and orders his immediate return to prison.
點樣做好媽媽嘅角色？
睇住你打針，我會比你更加痛。我寧願你扭計喊，都唔要你唔舒服喊。
我懷孕嘅時候最驚病，要撐得住健康。
預約堂培植蟲草 CS4，日日 keep 住食。
媽媽要健康，
身邊嘅人都要健康。
咁你係咪好媽媽啊？
做好媽媽比任何角色都要更加用心。超過90%受訪現任或準媽媽食用預約堂培植蟲草 CS4 後表示信賴及推薦。
日日 keep 住食，日霜都變成首飾霜。
Welcome back to TVB News. Optometrists are calling on members of the public to watch out for unregistered medical staff performing eyesight checks and selling contact lenses at eyeglass shops. Sharon Tang has more.
Are you one of the 120,000 Hong Kong people who own a pair of these? That estimate was put forward today by 6 local optometric associations. In August, the group surveyed nearly 600 contact lens users, but found some 80% of them would not seek medical help if they ever feel uncomfortable. Experts warned that improper use of contact lenses may affect corneal health or even lead to undesirable eye diseases. Take blurry vision, for example. Professionals noted that many thought the condition was caused by dry eyes or the differences between refractive errors. However, experts say the problem is caused by the contact lenses being too tight, which may have to do with incorrect curvatures. Under current laws, only registered optometrists are allowed to prescribe, fit, or supply prescription optical appliances. Offenders will be fined $5,000 and jailed for up to 6 months. Still, experts are calling on the government to introduce stricter regulations.
We would like to urge the government to change this one to prescribe the contact lens by optometrists only, but not all the others online shop or shops without a professional to prescribe these kind of medical devices.
The group also found 3 such shops in Mongkok where unregistered medical professionals offered eyesight checks to contact lens users. It says the illegal practice is a criminal offence and will report the cases to police. Sharon Tang, TVB News.
The consumer watchdog today warned elderly consumers to better protect themselves in the marketplace. This came after a Consumer Council study showed a third of the elderly people surveyed experienced unfair trade practices over the past year. Haley Joe reports.
A 62-year-old Hong Kong resident had been receiving cell phone bills by post and paying by cash for many years. One day, the service provider notified him that there would be a charge for paper bills, suggesting that he could receive his bill by email and pay by autopay. But it was beyond his ability, and he is not the only one. The Consumer Council survey found that it is one of the most common issues faced by elderly consumers in Hong Kong. The council received more than 6,300 complaints from consumers aged 55 or above in the past 3 years. Telecommunications services topped the list of complaints.
Now we find out, in fact, in Hong Kong, the aging consumers, they are generally very socialized and also active. It's a very active group. However, their protection is not sufficient and their choices is quite limited.
The council also said these consumers are prone to unfair trade practices because they are physically more vulnerable and digitally marginalized. Maggie Siu, an elderly service coordinator at Baptist Oi Kwan Social Service, echoed the view. She said their loneliness and desire to have social interaction often expose them to dishonest sales tactics and lead them to buy things that they don't need. The Consumer Council said it is putting more efforts into helping senior citizens become smarter consumers.
In the last 2 years, we start scaling up our resources in the public education front, especially working with the elderly centers and also some NGOs that focus on the elderly care.
The council also asked senior citizens to do their own research to know more about the products and services they're about to purchase so as to protect themselves from unfair practices. Haley Joe, TVB News.
Shortly before 7 p.m, 2 traffic accidents on Tuen Mun Road. Sources at the scene said at least 11 people have been injured in the crashes involving 13 vehicles. Some of the lanes of the Kowloon-bound carriageway near Hong Kong Garden in Sing Lung Tau are now closed to traffic. And 2 drivers were injured in a car crash outside the MTR Nam Chung station this morning. Some of the train station's glass window panes were damaged during the collision. Shards of glass were scattered around the place and part of the station had to be temporarily closed off. At around 11:30 a.m, a truck travelling on Lin Chang Road collided with a private car before hitting the train station. The 2 drivers were sent to hospital for treatment. And that's the news.